From the Lean Enterprise Institute in Boston, this is the WLEI Podcast, where we share stories of people making the world better through lean thinking and practice. For more information about LEI, including how we can help you apply lean thinking, please visit lean.org.
Hello, I'm Lex Schroeder, and my guest today is Cynthia Smith. Cynthia is Curator of Socially Responsible Design at Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, where she organizes an exhibition and publication series on humanitarian-focused design. Cynthia integrates her training as an industrial designer with her advocacy on human rights issues, serves on international design juries, and lectures widely on socially responsible design. In this episode, Cynthia and I talk about the intersection of lean product and process development, or LPPD, and socially responsible design, even though these two communities don't always use the same terms to describe the work they do. And Cynthia explains how design can be a catalyst for change. Welcome, Cynthia. Well, Cynthia, I'm really excited to meet you. I'd love to start by just asking you to introduce yourself and also kind of the work you've been doing with the Cooper Hewitt Museum.
Sure. I'm really glad to be here speaking with you today. And the larger Lean Enterprise Institute family. My name's Cynthia Smith. I'm a curator of socially responsible design at Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. A little bit about Cooper Hewitt. We're the design museum for the world's largest research, education, and museum complex, the Smithsonian Institution. And we're one of two Smithsonian museums that are located in New York City. We're the only museum in the United States devoted exclusively to historic and contemporary design. And our collection spans 30 centuries and contains well over 2,000 objects, from exquisite textiles to digital design works. Cooper Hewitt's mission is to educate, inspire, and empower people through design. And so we do that through a variety of ways, whether it's an exhibition or public program, publications, even interactive resources. We have a very robust website. So I hope, Lex, that next time you're in New York, you come visit. And all of the listeners, please come visit Cooper Hewitt. And then just a little bit about my own work at the Smithsonian Design Museum. So I organize an international humanitarian design exhibition series. I also author publications on that, and I do a lot of speaking on this area of design and socially responsible design. And I do that by this work. I do it by collaborating with filmmakers, educators, the general public, and other organizations. And these are ways that we can share how design can be a catalyst for change. And you'll see that as we go on with our conversation today, all the different ways that can be.
Thank you so much. The Cooper Hewitt Museum is one of my favorite in New York, and I remember a Design for Peace or Designing Peace exhibit on the top floor that blew my mind a few years ago. So it's a just incredible place, and I can't wait to go back. I get to go to New York this spring, so I'm hoping to make a visit then.
Well, that's so interesting. That was actually I organized that exhibition.
I wonder.
Yeah. So exciting that you saw it. Yeah.
I bought the book. It was gorgeous and really encouraging in so many ways. So thank you for your work. Lean Enterprise, that's fun. That's kismet. Lean Enterprise Institute promotes something called the Lean Transformation Framework. John Shook has spoken and written a lot about this, Jim Morgan and others. And it's this series of simple and elegant questions to guide companies through transformation, whatever the purpose of the company may be, whatever the product. And the first question of the Lean Transformation Framework is, what problem are you trying to solve? And grounding leaders and teams and aligning around what problem are you trying to solve? So I guess my question for you, Cynthia, is, when you think about how to make a meaningful impact, and starting with the problem to solve, what is the broadly speaking, what is the problem that socially responsible design is trying to solve?
Well, kind of stepping back, kind of the definition, how I define it, it really comes out of some work that was being done in England a number of years ago. But it's an ever evolving area of design. As you can imagine, it's responding to the world. So as the world changes, it evolves with it. But it really encompasses kind of a broad set of social, economic, and environmental concerns. The designers that work in this area they aim to increase inclusion. That these are designs that value and support mutual cooperation, that respect our interdependent living and non-living ecosystems, and incorporate multiple points of view, kind of a reflection of the world. And it spans all the design disciplines, from landscape architecture to service design to product design, graphic design. And it works across sectors, which I think is very interesting, the public, the private, and the civic sectors. So ultimately, it's really about improving quality and access to a multitude of kind of our basic services that we need to live, whether it's education, healthcare, affordable transportation, housing, clean water, sanitation, and the list goes on.
Wonderful. We ground lean thinking in practice, and it largely came out of the Toyota production system. And Toyota, I always tell the story of the Andon Cord at Toyota and how it shows respect for frontline workers who see a problem, and honoring frontline workers' wisdom. Right? It's totally different than the way so many companies operate. But anyway, there's this whole piece at Toyota too. There's a saying, we create people, not cars. And there's this white paper that you shared with us on, a design and social impact conference from a few years back, where you talk about, a particular community in India and a community of folks whose homes were destroyed in an earthquake, and they had to, build their homes on their own. And I think there's this question of, given that context and that scenario, what's the best approach to support a community like this one? For instance, do you design and build to replace those homes that were lost, or in the spirit of working with and alongside, do you work on skill development with those folks in that community who know their local place, and they know they know what they want, and it's a whole different way of working? So in other words, do you create designs or designers, or a little bit of both? How would you approach that situation? Can you let people know?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great question. And I think both are useful and based on context and capacity. So collectively, we can build capacity and agency for communities around the world. And I think that's one of the things you'll see in this kind of work. And I'll give you an example. For the first exhibition I organized, it was entitled Design for the Other 90%. It was a bit of a provocation to the design world. And it was a mirror of what was happening at the time. So traditionally, historically, professional trained designers have only focused on a very small percentage of the world's population, which left out the majority of the world. And most of those folks are living in emerging and developing economies. But there was a dramatic change that took place in the new millennium, and I'm talking 2000. There was the advent of the internet, where communication was much easier to do. And then there was also the United Nations had called for an end to poverty. So there was all this attention and metrics looking at ways to end poverty. But what happened was there was this whole new generation of architects, engineers, designers, along with many people who were not trained as designers, but were acting as designers, who were devising these low-cost solutions to help people emerge out of extreme poverty. I'm talking $1 a day, $2 poverty. And so this was, for me, design is a process. I'm less interested in I'm interested in expanding the conversation about who designs and what is design. And so that was really a turning point, and created quite an international conversation, as you can imagine. And then I followed with another show that focused on informal settlements, and traveled to 16 different cities all around the world. And this is where informal settlements, known as squatter communities, favelas in Brazil, they were growing, and they continue to grow. And so these are where people flee conflict or climate migration, or they come for a better life because they live in a place where they might not have the opportunities. But nonetheless, they move into areas where there's onto open public land that's very precarious. It's the leftover land, and they build these communities. And so I went to see how design might play a role, and what I came out of this long research was this idea of kind of a hybrid design between the formal and the non-formal, and all of this creativity that was coming up out of the communities themselves. And that's what I continue to try to search for, the ways that communities are working together and trying to build better systems, ways of living together. And this can manifest in all kinds of different ways. So is it the designs? Yes. And is it the designer? Are we creating better designers? I think it's both.
Yeah, it's both. Thank you for explaining that. When we talk about lean product and process development, there's a principle among the kind of 6 LPPD principles called designing the value stream, whereby, one leader, of course, with collective input, is responsible for thinking through the entire development and delivery process, from conception to production to ongoing service. I'm curious, what does the value stream, look like for a social impact project, and where are some of the biggest barriers or struggles in kind of making visible or understanding that, quote, value stream?
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. Yeah, so I think it's on one end is the challenge of how design studios can support this kind of design work, right? Are there alternatives to the fee-for-service model, right? Because generally designers are engaged by a company, or they're part of a company, or whatever. But to work in this arena, it's very different. So some firms work directly with nonprofits to support their missions. Others do the work pro bono, while others work within international organizations. So there's been one suggestion that I think is really interesting, is that someone proposed that we look to the public health model for this area of design. How do we create values and systems for this kind of work to tell the story of why this is important in the world, and how you might want to engage with it. In fact, a number of schools around the country have been, because there's a demand coming from students who want to work in this arena, they see the value in it. And for example, one school in Oregon has opened a Center for Public Interest Design. So there's all kinds of ways that academia are seeing this next generation of people who are interested in this. I also think on the other end of it is we also need to find ways to build local capacity. So one proposal is to create and support innovation hubs where local innovators are mentored and receive resources to bring their own initiatives to scale. And I think that's a really, really valuable one. Not just here, but it can happen in all, around the country. And I think it would mean requiring a sustained collaboration and commitment by the international academic community and other interested parties. So you would really have to put time and effort over the long haul to create something like that.
That's a perfect segue. I wanted to ask you, I mean, you just started to speak to some effective models, right, for doing this type of work effectively in the community, but are there, other models for social impact design that come to mind, or specific stories, that jump out at you that you could share?
Sure. So I do a whole range of, have done a whole range of exhibitions. Once I was looking internationally, and then we realized that there was lots of poverty, entrenched poverty in the United States. So I did a whole exhibition on looking at ways that communities are emerging out of poverty, and we created this wonderful, with my colleagues, a process lab looking at the process of design. It was entitled Citizen Design. But one of the things that we included in that was this wonderful graphic. There were this great group of US-based designers. It was actually a group of young women who were community engaged designers, and so they put together this poster that spoke to that, and it was called the Visual Primer for Social Impact Design. And they listed, and it was very kind of tongue-in-cheek. They had two different designers, one who did it incorrectly and one who did it a little bit better, and kind of a kind way to show the practices. You can actually find this urban pedagogy, the Center for Urban Pedagogy here in Brooklyn, actually sells this on their website. So if you're interested in getting this visual aid, but it was interesting. So the practices, the community engaged design practices that they listed on here were seek out people in the community to find out what's important to them, right? It's really about engaging community. 2, it's very simple. This is listen to their stories. And this is true whether you're doing design in the United States in a neighborhood, or even you're traveling and doing work in other parts of the world. Listen to their stories, find out about existing local efforts, and join with them if that's feasible. And then take time. And they really emphasize this. This can be a very long time. So make a commitment. Listen to all their concerns and the disagreements. Because anytime you get together a larger group, you're going to have different points of view. And I thought this was so wonderful, design a way for them to work together. It isn't just about the end, it's about the process. And then this will help them co-create with you to design, to put together a design proposal. And then ultimately you end up with something that everybody can use. I think one of the first lessons I learned came from this gentleman who was he was designing, I think sanitation systems in Africa, and they built them. It was community centered, but they didn't ask anybody about it, and they came back like several years later. Nobody was using it.
Yeah,
nobody was using it.
Yeah.
So you really have to listen and learn, and they're experts in their culture. And
like you said, it's simple, but it's unfortunately really hard to do for a lot of folks. These participatory leadership design principles, I mean, as I think of them, we see that in the work that you do, we see that in the lean community. And one thing I talk a lot about with, Jim Morgan and John Shook and others is it's different language for similar principles, and how fun it is when you get, leaders and practitioners across these different areas coming together to think about what are the commonalities. So it's fun to talk about, quote, value creation with you, from this lean point of view. But it's, what do you know? It's about listening too. It's about, and it's about working intentionally and slowly, even though it feels a little too slow sometimes. Or it's about, Toyota talks about problems or treasures. Well, yeah, and conflict can be generative, or like you said, disagreements are bound to happen, and that can be extraordinarily generative, just like problems or treasures. You find out so much if you are able to bring a problem-solving mindset. So it's fun for me kind of listening to you describe your work with my lean hat on. There are overlaps, and I think the possibilities for collaboration across these worlds are sort of endless. As you think toward, it's a really interesting time in the world, difficult time in the world in many ways. As you think toward the future of social impact design, or whatever language you would use, what are you most excited about, or what are you looking forward to, or where do you think the opportunities are?
Hmm. Wow, what a great question. So I'm working on my next project right now, and I can't talk too much about it because it's still information. But it is there. We have these. There's a couple things I guess I want to say. Um, in response to increasing urgent challenges, and we can list them off: a warming planet, biodiversity loss, sea level rise, income inequality, and more. I think there are lots of people, and you included, from what I understand, in this organization, is going to require systemic and structural changes. That we need to, and this is an opportunity, really, really need to move from a mindset of simple sustainability to envision and implement more regenerative, transformative designs and systems that can restore and revitalize our ecosystem. And those can take on many, many forms. I know they're creating a satellite to look at methane and track methane around the planet, so we can reduce methane emissions. I think that's a really interesting product and system, because if you get methane down, that has impact in 10 years. Carbon takes a much longer time to reduce. So there's those big scale planetary systems of lowering emissions. You can capture carbon with nature-based solutions, which I think are the best ones, because then you're looking at the entire ecosystem and other species. I think it's a bit problematic when you start to infuse some of these technological solutions. And I think that the UN has put out a list of the ethics of using those kind of innovations, because their design can have really unintended consequences if you just do it without thinking of the larger time frame. Or so I think there's all kinds of really interesting, and there are a lot of designers that see this as an opportunity for us to amend our relations with not just each other, but other species in our entire ecosystem. And so I think that if we can take it as an opportunity to to see what we've been doing that has had negative impact and transform that into something better. I think there's where I get excited.
Well, that feels like a really good place to wrap up for me, but is any final thoughts or invitations that you would share with our audience if people, want to learn more, or what can I do in the short term? Any final thoughts or calls to action?
John Paul Lederach, I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He's an international peace organizer. And I think he talks about and he writes about our moral imagination, which I think is a really interesting concept. And a lot of young designers are moved by this. They're thinking about modeling the future they want that doesn't exist, but modeling it today, kind of as heralding what could be possible. And they take inspiration from him. And so if you'll indulge me a little bit, if I could read this. And he's written, if humans are to survive as a global community, as we must find ways to foster moral imagination, the capacity to recognize turning points and possibilities, to venture down unknown paths and create what does not yet exist. It's necessary to cultivate an interdependent web of relationships and honor its complexity. Trust that creative and meaningful change is possible, and seek constructive engagement with people and things we fear most and least understand.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. I really appreciate it. Let's stay connected.
Yes. And when you're in New York, please be my guest.